My father called me a mistake, so I left them, but my sister told me that she is afraid of them. I never expected my sister's graduation to be the worst day of my life. Maybe I should have. My parents have never exactly been kind to me, but I thought, just this once, they'd at least pretend. Pretend to be proud of both their daughters. Pretend to be normal. But no, that would have been too much to ask. The day started tense, as it always did when I had to be in the same room as my parents. My mother, Deborah, had been barking orders since sunrise, forcing Amelia into her perfect white dress while criticizing every little thing I did. "Melanie, your hair looks flat. Is that what you're wearing? You look unkempt. You're embarrassing." I bit my tongue. I'd learned long ago that fighting back only made things worse. The graduation ceremony was being held at the largest event hall in town. Amelia's private school had spared no expense. Chandeliers, gold-trimmed carpets, perfectly arranged flowers. It was extravagant, and my parents thrived in it. They were always obsessed with appearances, always desperate to impress people. That's probably why they hated me so much, because I never fit their perfect mold. The ceremony itself was long, boring, the usual speeches about bright futures and endless possibilities. I sat stiffly, barely paying attention, trapped between my parents in the front row. The real nightmare began after the diplomas were handed out, when the families were invited to celebrate. The hall was packed with people, students, teachers, parents. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed. Everyone was in high spirits. I tried to slip away to a quiet corner, but my mother grabbed my wrist. "You're not running off," she hissed. "You're standing with us. At least try to behave for once." I had no choice. I stood beside my parents while they basked in attention. People swarmed around Amelia, congratulating her, praising her achievements. She was the perfect daughter, after all, the one they actually wanted. And then it happened. Some well-dressed man, one of my father's business associates, I think, raised his glass and said, "What a beautiful family. You must be so proud of both your daughters." Both. I should have known that was a mistake. My father, Richard, chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, Melanie? No, you misunderstand. Amelia was planned. She's the golden child. But Melanie?" He laughed louder, raising his glass. "Melanie was a mistake. An accident." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. I froze. I felt my stomach drop, my skin turn ice cold. The air was sucked out of the room. My mother joined in, sipping her champagne, her lips curling into a smirk. We only wanted one child. But, well, accidents happen. People were still laughing. No one, not a single person, defended me. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, that my father hadn't just stood there, in front of dozens of people, and announced to the world that I shouldn't exist. But the laughter, the amused glances, the way Amelia smirked without a hint of sympathy, it was real. All of it was real. I should have said something, should have screamed, should have called them out for being the cruel, heartless people they were. But I couldn't. My throat closed up, my legs felt weak. I stood there, humiliated, while people whispered behind their hands, as if I was some pathetic joke. "Second children are rarely necessary, anyway," my mother added lightly, as if she was discussing the weather. "We just tolerated Melanie." More laughter, more stares, more whispers. I felt like I was drowning. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. The room blurred, my vision swimming. My own parents, my own flesh and blood, had just told an entire room full of people that I wasn't wanted, that I was nothing. I finally managed to move. My body went into autopilot. I turned, shoving past the crowd, past the judgmental eyes, past Amelia's smug face. I needed air. I needed to get out before I shattered into 1,000 pieces. But the night wasn't over. The humiliation hadn't even peaked yet. I barely made it to the hallway when I heard footsteps behind me. "Melanie," a voice called, "Amelia." Of course. She had followed me, and when I turned, I saw that same smirk on her face. She folded her arms, tilting her head like she was studying a particularly amusing insect. "God, you're so dramatic," she sighed. "It was just a joke." I stared at her. A joke. That's what she called it. I had spent my entire life being treated like an afterthought, a nuisance, a mistake, and now, when it had finally been said out loud in the worst way possible, she wanted me to believe it was funny? "Go to hell," I muttered. Amelia rolled her eyes. "Seriously, Mel, you need to stop making everything about you. Tonight is my night. Maybe if you weren't so, Mom and Dad would actually like you. I don't know what happened. Something inside me snapped. The years of insults, the endless belittling, the way I was always treated as disposable, it all boiled over. Before I knew it, my hand was moving. I slapped Amelia. The sound echoed down the hall. Her eyes widened in shock. For the first time in her perfect little life, she wasn't the golden child. She wasn't the favorite. She was just a girl who had been smacked in the face, and she had no idea how to handle it. But I didn't stay to watch her reaction. I turned and walked away. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. The night wasn't over yet, but at least for once, I had done something. I had fought back. And even though I knew I'd pay for it later, in that moment, it felt good. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just their mistake. I was something else. I was never supposed to exist. At least, that's what my parents made sure I understood from the moment I was old enough to comprehend words. Amelia was the daughter they wanted, the golden child, the one they had planned for, the one whose birthdays were celebrated with extravagant parties and whose every little achievement was met with applause. From the moment she was born, the world seemed to exist just to cater to her, to lift her up, to ensure she was always the center of attention. I, on the other hand, was the mistake, the unwanted second child, the burden. My childhood was a long, exhausting series of disappointments. Not my disappointments, my parents. They were disappointed I wasn't more like Amelia, disappointed I wasn't prettier, quieter, more graceful. Amelia was everything they had hoped for. I was the defective spare. I don't remember my first birthday party because I never had one. I only realized that wasn't normal when I was 5 years old, standing in the middle of Amelia's birthday party, watching as she twirled in her brand new princess dress while our parents beamed with pride. The backyard was decorated with pink balloons, a massive unicorn cake sat on the table, and at least 30 kids ran around, playing games organized by the magician my parents had hired. I remember tugging on my mother's sleeve, looking up at her with wide eyes. Did I have a party like this when I turned 5? She barely spared me a glance. No, Melanie. Why? She sighed, setting down her champagne flute. Because we didn't bother throwing one. I don't think I cried. Not then. I just stood there, staring at the balloons, at Amelia, at the way everyone loved her. And I realized something, even as a child. I was never going to have what she had. It only got worse as we got older. Every year, Amelia's birthdays were grander than the last. Theme parks, spa days, private parties at fancy venues. She was showered with gifts, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. When I turned 8, I got a sweater 3 sizes too big that my mother had picked up at a discount store. You should be grateful, she said when she saw my face. Some children don't get anything. I stopped expecting presents after that. School was no different. Amelia was always praised for her intelligence, for her beauty, for the way she carried herself with effortless grace. Teachers adored her. Other parents fawned over her. I was just the shadow trailing behind, the younger sister who never quite measured up. I wasn't dumb. I actually did well in school, better than Amelia in some subjects, but it didn't matter. If Amelia got an A, she was a genius. If I got an A, it was about time. If she won a school competition, my parents framed the certificate and hung it on the wall. When I won first place in a state writing contest, my mother barely glanced at the award before tossing it in a drawer. You're not a writer, Melanie. Don't waste your time on things that don't matter. Nothing I did mattered. I spent years trying to earn their approval. I dressed the way my mother wanted me to dress. I styled my hair the way she said I should. I joined activities I had no interest in, hoping if I excelled in something they liked, they'd finally see me. But they didn't. It was never enough. I still remember the day I learned that no matter what I did, I would always come second to Amelia. I was 12 years old, and I had spent weeks practicing for a ballet recital. My instructor had told me I had natural talent, that I had a chance to be in the front row of the performance, which was a big deal for someone my age. I worked harder than I ever had before, rehearsing until my muscles ached, staying late after class to perfect every step. The night of the performance, I scanned the audience, hoping, just hoping, that my parents would be there. They weren't. I danced anyway. I gave it my all, putting everything into every movement. When the recital ended, I rushed to the dressing room, excited to tell my parents how well it went. But when I checked my phone, there were no messages. Confused, I called home. My mother picked up on the third ring. What? Where are you? I asked, my voice small. Oh, she said, sounding genuinely surprised, as if she had completely forgotten about my recital. We couldn't make it. Amelia had a tennis match. I don't even remember hanging up. I just remember standing there, staring at my reflection in the dressing room mirror, still in my costume, still wearing my stage makeup, and realizing they were never going to love me the way they loved her. It wasn't that they hated me. That would have been easier, in a way. Hatred requires attention. Hatred is loud. But my parents didn't hate me. They just didn't care. And somehow that was worse. I stopped trying after that. I quit ballet. I stopped pushing myself to be the best in school. If nothing I did mattered, then why bother? It wasn't rebellion, exactly. I didn't act out, didn't throw tantrums, didn't break rules just to get attention. I simply faded into the background, taking up as little space as possible, trying not to exist more than I already did. Amelia, of course, took full advantage of it. She basked in the attention, in the love, in the constant praise. She knew she was the favorite, and she made sure I knew it too. Mom and Dad don't like you because you're boring, she told me once, twirling a strand of her perfect hair around her finger. She was 15, I was 13, and she had just won some kind of student award that our parents had gushed over for weeks. You're just there. You don't do anything special. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say, that's not true. I do things. I try. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I was just there. A mistake. A spare. A shadow in Amelia's perfect, golden world. I didn't sleep the night after Amelia's graduation. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the laughter, saw the smug expression on my mother's face, felt the heat of humiliation creeping up my neck as my father raised his glass and declared, without hesitation, that I was a mistake. By morning, my humiliation had hardened into something colder, sharper. I wasn't sad anymore. I was furious. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to be good enough, trying to prove that I was more than just a spare child, an accident, an afterthought. And what had it gotten me? Nothing. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be Amelia. I would never be what they wanted. And I was done. The house was quiet when I stepped out of my room. My parents had been up late drinking and entertaining their guests after the graduation party, so they were probably still asleep. I didn't care. I marched straight downstairs, heart pounding so hard it hurt, and slammed my hands down on the kitchen table. My mother, sitting in her silk robe, barely flinched. She took a slow sip of her coffee, not even looking at me. My father, reading the newspaper, didn't acknowledge me either. Amelia, sitting between them, scrolling through her phone, let out an exaggerated sigh. God, Melanie. What now? I ignored her. My voice shook, but I forced the words out anyway. What the hell was that last night? My father finally lowered his newspaper and gave me a blank stare. What was what? You called me a mistake, I said, my voice rising. In front of everyone. You laughed about it. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? My mother sighed, setting down her coffee cup. Oh, Melanie, you're exaggerating. I felt something inside me snap. I am not exaggerating. I shouted. You stood in a room full of people and told them I wasn't supposed to exist, and they all laughed and you let them. My father's expression didn't change. Well, he said, it's the truth. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. You really don't feel bad at all, do you? My voice cracked. You don't regret saying it? He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. What do you want me to say, Melanie? That I'm proud of you? For what? What have you ever done that's worth being proud of? Silence. I felt my whole body go numb. My mother didn't contradict him. She didn't rush to say, that's not true. Of course we're proud of you. She just reached for her coffee again, completely indifferent. Like this conversation was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Like I was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Amelia scoffed, finally looking up from her phone. You're so dramatic. If you actually did something with your life, maybe they'd be proud of you. I turned to her, shaking. What the hell is wrong with you? She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Stop acting like some kind of victim. You've spent your whole life whining about how unfair everything is instead of actually trying to be better. Maybe if you worked as hard as I do, they'd respect you. I couldn't breathe. I was seeing red. I have tried, I snarled. I've spent my entire life trying. And no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. Because I was never you. Amelia smirked. Well, whose fault is that? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them understand how much they had hurt me. But looking at them, my father's cold indifference, my mother's bored expression, Amelia's smug little smirk, I realized something. They knew. They knew exactly how much they had hurt me. They just didn't care. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blurred. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I took a shaky breath, my hands clenched at my sides. I'm done. My mother raised an eyebrow. Done with what? With this. I gestured wildly around the kitchen. With you. With all of you. I'm done trying to be a part of this family. I'm done pretending you give a damn about me. You win. You never wanted me, and now you don't have to deal with me anymore. I expected some kind of reaction. A flicker of guilt. A protest. Anything. But my father just picked up his newspaper again. My mother took another sip of coffee. Amelia smirked. Good, she said. Finally. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had always known they didn't love me. That much had been clear for years. But some pathetic, desperate part of me had still hoped. Maybe if I said the right thing, if I finally stood up for myself, they'd realize what they had done. They'd apologize. They'd try. They didn't. I turned on my heel and walked out of the kitchen, up the stairs, into my room. I grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing things inside. Clothes, my laptop, my savings. I didn't have a plan. I didn't care. I just needed to be gone. I was halfway through stuffing my bag when Amelia appeared in my doorway, arms crossed. Oh, come on, she said. Where are you even gonna go? You have no money, no job, no friends who actually like you. I zipped my bag and slung it over my shoulder. Anywhere is better than here. She laughed. You'll be back. I met her eyes, my jaw clenched. No, I said. I won't. She shrugged. Whatever. Just don't come crawling back when you realize you can't make it on your own. I pushed past her, ignoring the smugness in her voice, and stormed down the stairs. My parents didn't even look up as I walked toward the front door. My fingers trembled on the handle. Some stupid part of me still hoped. Maybe they'd stop me. Maybe they'd say something, anything. They didn't. I opened the door, stepped outside, slammed it shut behind me. And for the first time in my life, I was free. I had no idea where I was going when I left home. I just knew I wasn't going back. I spent the first few nights couch surfing, sleeping in my friend Rachel's tiny apartment. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket and let me crash on her lumpy sofa. Stay as long as you need, she said, and I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in my life someone actually wanted me around. But I couldn't stay there forever. Rachel was barely scraping by herself, and I refused to be another burden. So, I did what I had to do. I got a job. It wasn't glamorous. A dingy little diner on the edge of town, run by a grumpy old man named Gus who had probably been alive since the dinosaurs. He hired me on the spot when I told him I'd work any shift, any day, without complaining. Fine, he grumbled. Just don't screw up. It was exhausting. Double shifts, rude customers, aching feet. But it was mine. For the first time, I was making my own money, earning my own way. At night, I studied. I knew college was my only way out. The only way to build a life that had nothing to do with them. My parents had made it clear they weren't going to help me. Not that I expected them to. They had Amelia. She was their investment. They paid over $250,000 to send her to the best private university in the country, covering everything, tuition, housing, even a car. Me? They didn't even ask if I had plans. So I made my own. I applied to every scholarship I could find. Full rides, need-based grants, obscure little awards for left-handed students who could juggle. Anything that would get me out of this town and into a future they couldn't take from me. And somehow, against all odds, it worked. I still remember the moment I got the email. It was 3 in the morning. I was sitting on Rachel's couch, half asleep with my laptop in my lap. When I saw the subject line, "Congratulations, full scholarship awarded." I stared at it for a full minute, convinced I was hallucinating. Then I clicked it, and I read the words that changed everything. A full scholarship, tuition, housing, books, everything covered. My dream university, a place I never thought I'd be able to afford, and it was mine. I let out a choked laugh, clapping my hand over my mouth to keep from waking Rachel. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. For the first time in my life, I had one. But, of course, the news reached my parents. I didn't tell them. I hadn't spoken to them in months. But word travels fast in small towns, and before I knew it, my mother was calling me. I let it go to voicemail. Then Amelia texted me. "Mom and Dad heard about your little scholarship. They're shocked. LOL. I stared at the screen, feeling a slow, simmering anger in my chest. Shocked. Of course they were. They had spent my entire life acting like I was useless, and now, here I was, proving them wrong. I didn't reply. Then my father called. This time, I answered. Not because I wanted to talk to him, but because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the disbelief in his voice. Melanie. His voice was calm, measured, as if we hadn't spoken in nearly a year, as if he hadn't told me to my face that he had nothing to be proud of. I heard you got into that university. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. And a scholarship too? Yes, I said flatly. Silence. Then he let out a short laugh. Well, I'll admit, I wasn't expecting that. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. So, he continued, what's your plan? My plan? Yes. How are you going to afford everything? A scholarship doesn't cover everything. There it was. He was waiting for me to admit I still needed help, waiting for me to ask for something, because that's what they wanted. They wanted me to fail, to crawl back, begging. Too bad for them. It actually does cover everything, I said, my voice smooth and unwavering. Housing, books, food. I don't need a dime from you. Silence again. A long, stretching pause where I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. Then he exhaled sharply. Well, that's good then. That's good then. Not I'm proud of you. Not congratulations. Just that's good then. I clenched my jaw. Yeah, it is. I hope you don't expect us to contribute, he said, as if he needed to clarify. As if I would ever, in a million years, ask them for anything. Your mother and I already spent quite a bit on Amelia's tuition. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A sharp, bitter sound. Oh, I know, I said. $250,000, wasn't it? He didn't respond. I shook my head. You never saved anything for me, did you? A beat of silence. Then, you never gave us a reason to. I felt something in me go cold. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Got it. And then I hung up. I blocked his number. Then my mother's. Then Amelia's, just for good measure. And then I sat back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, feeling lighter than I ever had before. For the first time in my life, they were nothing to me. And it felt good. I hadn't thought about them in years. 5 whole years, to be exact. 5 years since I last heard their voices, since I last stood in that house, since I last cared about anything they did or said. And then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. At first, I didn't even recognize the number. I had long since blocked them, deleted every trace of them from my life. But something about it made my stomach clench, some instinctive part of me recognizing the past creeping back in. I let it ring. Then it rang again, and again. On the 4th call, I finally picked up. I shouldn't have. Melanie. My mother's voice sent a chill down my spine. It had been so long since I heard it that, for a second, I thought I had imagined it. But no, she was real. She was calling me. I almost hung up. But then she said something that made me freeze. It's about Amelia. I didn't speak. My mind raced through possibilities. Was she dead? Had something happened? My mother sighed dramatically, as if this was just another burden added to her long, exhausting life. She's in trouble. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She's not well, my mother continued, clearly waiting for me to ask why. I didn't. She's fallen into some bad habits. The first flicker of something other than cold indifference stirred in my chest. I had no love for Amelia, no reason to care about her fate. But the way my mother was speaking, so carefully, so deliberately avoiding details, made me uneasy. What do you mean, bad habits? I finally asked, voice flat. Silence on the other end. Then, my father's voice cut in. She's a drug addict. I blinked. I had expected many things. An accident, a scandal, maybe even jail. But this? She's ruined herself, my mother said, voice dripping with disgust. Throwing her life away, embarrassing herself, embarrassing us. There it was. Embarrassing us. They didn't care about Amelia. They didn't care that their perfect daughter, their golden child, was addicted to drugs. They cared that people knew. I should have expected it. What do you want from me? I asked, because I knew they hadn't called just to inform me. They wanted something. They always wanted something. A long pause. Then my mother's voice, hesitant, carefully worded. We were just wondering if, perhaps, at some point, you introduced Amelia to all of this? I actually laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You think I did this? Well, Melanie, we don't know what you've been doing these last 5 years. No, I snapped. You don't. Because you never cared. You never called. You never asked. Silence. And then my father, his voice hard. Amelia had a bright future. And somehow, she ended up like this. It's strange, isn't it? You disappeared, and now she's a junkie. Feels like more than a coincidence. My fingers clenched around my phone. I felt something burning in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, unfiltered rage. Are you insane? I hissed. Do you hear yourselves? You think I wanted this for her? You think I somehow plotted this? My mother exhaled sharply, clearly exasperated. We're just trying to understand how this happened, Melanie. She had everything. She had you. I cut in. She had your money, your love, your constant, never-ending attention. And she still ended up like this. And somehow, that's my fault? More silence. Then my father, quietly, as if it was only now dawning on him. She had everything. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Because now, finally, he was realizing the truth. Amelia had everything. Every advantage. Every opportunity. Every ounce of love they had to give. And yet, here we were. I was fine. She was not. And that terrified them. I didn't do this to her, I said, voice steel. You did. They didn't respond. I let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. Let them sit in the uncomfortable truth. Then, finally, I exhaled, steadying my voice. Lose my number. And I hung up. For good. The calls didn't stop after that first one. At first, I ignored them. Let them go to voicemail. Deleted them without listening. But they were relentless. Every day, sometimes multiple times a day, my phone would light up with their names. Mom, Dad, home. They had never cared before. Never called. Never checked in. But now, with Amelia spiraling, they suddenly needed me. I refused to answer. Then, one evening, as I was heading home from work, my phone buzzed again. Another call. I was about to send it to voicemail when, out of nowhere, a text popped up. Pick up the damn phone, Melanie. It was from a new number. A local one. I hesitated, then answered. The moment I pressed the phone to my ear, my mother's voice snapped through the speaker. Oh, so you can answer. I kept walking, barely slowing my pace. Lose my number. Melanie, stop. This is serious. It wasn't serious when you accused me of turning Amelia into a drug addict. I said, my voice calm but biting. She ignored that. Your sister needs help. I snorted. Then send her to rehab. We can't do that. I rolled my eyes. Right. Because God forbid anyone finds out the perfect Amelia is a mess. There was silence, which told me everything I needed to know. I sighed, exasperated. So what do you want? Why are you really calling me? We need you to come home, she said. I stopped walking, laughed. Excuse me? You need to come back and help us deal with this? She repeated, her voice laced with irritation, as if I were the unreasonable one. Help you deal with it? She won't listen to us, my mother said. She's erratic, emotional. Hi. I cut in. A sharp exhale. Melanie, stop being difficult. Oh, I'm difficult now? I let out a hollow laugh. You ignored me my whole life. Told me I was worthless. That I was a mistake. Now Amelia's your problem, and suddenly, I'm supposed to be the responsible one. Melanie. No. Your sister is sick. So send her to rehab. A pause. Then, carefully, people will talk. There it was. The real reason. They weren't afraid for Amelia. They were afraid of what people would think. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. That's not my problem. Melanie, please. She never said please. Not unless it benefited her. But I wasn't playing this game. Not anymore. No, I said again, my voice firm. She is your daughter. Your golden child. Your problem. A beat of silence. Then my mother, sharp as a knife. You're being selfish. I nearly choked on a laugh. I'm selfish? You're turning your back on your family when we need you. You turned your back on me a long time ago. Silence. I took a slow breath, my grip tightening around my phone. This is the last time we speak. Don't call me again. And then I hung up. For the second time in my life, I walked away from them. And this time, I didn't look back. It was a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, the way I had ignored every other call from my parents. But something in my gut told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear. Silence. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in years, weak, almost hesitant. Melanie? Amelia. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, gripping my phone, my heartbeat suddenly louder than it should have been. Please, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Don't hang up. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes. Why are you calling me? A dry, humorless chuckle. Because you're the only person who hasn't treated me like a complete embarrassment. That surprised me. Since when do I not embarrass you? Since I lost everything, she said, and realized I never actually had anything to begin with. I leaned against the kitchen counter, fingers drumming against the surface. So you're calling because you finally figured out that our parents are toxic? A bitter pause. Guess I'm a slow learner. I wanted to be angry, to remind her of every awful thing she had ever said to me, every time she had laughed at my pain. But something about the way she sounded, raw, hollow, made it impossible to hold on to the rage. What happened to you, Amelia? I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. A long silence. Then, quietly, I broke. I waited. I spent my whole life trying to be perfect, she continued, her voice uneven. Trying to be their Amelia. The Amelia they wanted me to be. The one who got straight A's, who won every competition, who made them look good at every dinner party. I wasn't allowed to fail. Wasn't allowed to stop. And I was terrified, Mel. Every second of every day, I was terrified that if I slipped up, if I breathed wrong, they would hate me the way they hated you. I sucked in a sharp breath. She laughed softly. And it worked, you know? They loved me. But only the version of me that was perfect. I could hear her shifting on the other end, as if she couldn't sit still. And then college happened, she murmured. And suddenly, there were people who were better than me, smarter than me, prettier than me. And I didn't know how to deal with that. Because I was supposed to be the best. Mom and Dad made sure I knew that. And I thought if I couldn't be the best, they wouldn't love me anymore. I swallowed hard. So I found something that made me feel better. She let out another humorless laugh. A little at first. Just enough to take the edge off. Enough to stop the panic attacks. To keep me awake when I needed to be awake. To make sure I was still Amelia the golden child. I knew what was coming. I had seen it before. Read about it. Heard about it. But hearing it from her. She inhaled sharply. And then, one day, I realized I couldn't stop. A long silence stretched between us. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling shakily. Why are you telling me this? Another pause. Then, quietly, because I know I was awful to you. And I know I don't deserve your help. But, Melanie, I don't know who I am without them. Without their expectations. Without this pressure. And I can't do this anymore. My throat tightened. I don't know how to exist without being perfect, she admitted, her voice breaking. And I'm so tired, Mel. I felt something crack inside me. Because she was right. She had been awful to me. She had spent years making my life miserable. But I knew that feeling. Of being tired. Of being nothing. Of feeling like you weren't enough no matter what you did. The only difference was, I had stopped trying. She never had. I closed my eyes. Took a deep breath. And for the first time in my life, I felt sorry for her.